And we're on the clock. Welcome back, everybody. We are in the end of week 2. One thing that I want to say before we get started is your exercise 1 was due on Tuesday. Not everyone's is in. I'd say about 80% of the class, which is great. I'm going to grade those tomorrow. So if yours is not in, and I'm speaking to whoever's listening, whoever, get that in tonight or get it in like tomorrow morning because that's 10 points. I will always grade late work, but if when I start grading, if it's not in, you're going to lose a point every class that we meet. And you might as well get full credit for it. No, don't get a 9 out of 10. Uh, try to get as many points as you can. Okay, so that said, your exercise 2 is live now. It looks like people are able to access it. It's the link from this drive, but that same link is also on Blackboard. So access it, and hopefully you can follow along with me in real time. That way, if you got questions, you can ask. I'm going to do the demo with you, but it'll also be recorded here and archived. So if you're not here or you just want to watch and then go back and listen to the recording, watch, that's fine too. But it might be beneficial because if this was an on-ground class, I would have the file accessible. Okay, yeah, no, just hit submit. See, that's something that I don't know about. If Google Classroom works the same way, where you can upload something, but if you don't actually hit the button that says turn it in, the instructor won't see it. So if it's in there, turn it in. Like I said, that will be graded tomorrow around 3:30. So I gave you a little extra time because this is all new, certainly to me and maybe to you too. So I don't want to penalize anybody for protocol errors. So just make sure that it's in. I know that it works because quite a few students have already submitted. So I think we're good. All right, so this class, what I want to focus on is selections and masking. I also had 2 questions. There was, how do I download a paper texture and make things look old? No problem, we can cover that. And another student had a composition that was a little bit bigger than the specified dimensions. I want to talk about the difference between image size and canvas size. They sound almost identical, and you might think, well, what's the difference? There is a difference. And we need to talk about like how to crop an image versus how to just make globally an image smaller. So that's to be covered tonight. After we do that, I'll stop the recording. I'll probably take attendance around that time, and then we will do a mid critique for anybody that wants it. I'm not going to make it mandatory for this first project. I think it's pretty beneficial. So if you've got work and you want some feedback or you get specific questions about X, Y, and Z, now's the time to ask. Because come next week, your projects are due a week from today. Tuesday, we'll introduce a little bit more material, and I'll probably even loosely acknowledge project 2. Thursday will be the proper critique. I'll walk you through what that's going to be like at the beginning of class. And then we'll get into it, and then I will fully expose you to project 2. We'll probably do a small demo, and then I'll turn you loose for the end of week 3. Okay, so if there are no questions, let's go ahead and get right to it. Why don't you take a minute to download the file if you have not, open it in Photoshop. Even if you're not going to follow along, I think it's a good idea to have it open. That way you can just kind of look at it and see how it's structured. Should be pretty straightforward, but I would like to introduce some selection tools that I think are going to be pretty useful that you might not be using just yet. All right, so let's do that. I'm going to present. Now, my chat pod is covering up the host pod. So if you have a question, and I hope that you do, I'm not going to know who asked it. You can unmute, that's totally fine, but I won't know who it is. So I'll just kind of generically say, oh, that's person or whatever. Or you can type into the chat pod, that's fine too. So I named this composition, Magritte masking. Rene Magritte is a pretty famous, I think French, could be wrong, but I think a French surrealist. You will recognize quite a few of his paintings. Maybe chief amongst them is the image of a kind of looks like a business person, apple for the head and bowler hat. We're going to kind of take that idea, but we're going to use it as a masking demo. I've used this demo. It goes back to almost when I started teaching. So it works. There's no doubt about it. All right. So what do we got here? First things first. First thing that I would always encourage everyone to do. Let's take a look at the image size just to get an idea of like, how big is this thing? So image size. I'm going to change. Well, I'll stay with inches. That's fine. So it's about a 9x9, that big. But you'll notice the resolution's a bit different. It's 72 dpi. There are two resolutions that I want you to absolutely commit to memory. I'm not going to quiz you. There's not going to be any tests, but this is important. One is 300 dpi. 300 always is for printing. So this should alert you right now that this resolution will not hold up to print. The other resolution is 72. Let me backtrack for 1 second. There are plethora of resolutions. There's 600, there's 275, there's 150, there's this, that, and there. You can plug in whatever resolution you want. But the two big ones that are most commonly used would be 300 for print or 72, and this would be for web or broadcast. So the motion graphic that you see that introduces whatever commercial you're looking at, 72 dpi. The website that you're looking at, 72 dpi. The I don't know, the Instagram post, 72 dpi. Anything that's online, 72 dpi. So why in God's name would I want this to be 72 dpi? Well, two reasons. One, it's not going to print. And two, the smaller your resolution, the smaller the file size. So if we're just doing a demo like this, it makes no sense to give you a 300 dpi. These should be kind of fast as far as like, going through bandwidth. I want it small, so it goes through that Ethernet cable or that fiber optic cable really, really fast. The idea is like, I can upload it really fast. You can download it really fast. Also, any operation that you do to the composition should be ostensibly 4 times faster than that 300 dpi. So that's the reason this is a little bit small. It wasn't a mistake. And in fact, unless there's a really, really good reason, all of the demos that I'm going to give you will be 72 dpi just for that reason. So that's what that's about. All right, so now we know a little bit about this. We choose OK. Image size, for whatever reason, it always takes a little while. You think you just hit OK and then boom, dialog box closes out. It's a little bit sticky. Maybe your system's not as bad as mine, but I know the ones at the school that I teach at take a long time, and my computer takes a while too. And this is a pretty beefy computer, so if it takes a while, don't panic. Here's what I like to do when it comes to diving into someone else's project. I want to take a look at the layers. So what's going on here? It looks like I got 4 layers here. None of them have been named. So if this was a real project, I'd want to go through and double click and call this apple and hat and whatever. But let's just real quick take a look at what we're working with here. Up first is Pexels Pixbay. So I'm going to turn all of them off and turn on the top layer, and it's a layer of clouds. Cool. All right, so I will double click, call this clouds. You don't have to name them. That's fine. If you want to, great. That's a good habit to get into. But I'm not going to be grading on a rubric portion where there's a technical component. It's just if yours looks like mine within reason, you'll get the full 10 points. But I want to try to set some good habits out, so I did name it. So that's clouds. Cool. Turn on the next layer. And I'm just clicking on the little visibility here, little eyeball. That's something that's ubiquitous in Adobe. Anytime you see that little eyeball, that just means it's visible or invisible. Hat. Double click here, hat. Now, one thing that's going to happen, and it happens on accident, is you're going to try to rename a layer and you'll double click, but it won't be quite, it's kind of a fickle program. Like you literally have to double click on the words right here. If you double click a little bit to one side, your layer styles will come up. That's not going to help you, so I'll close that out. And if you double click on the thumbnail, you'll, in this case, go into an isolation mode. That won't always happen. There's a reason that happened with this. And I can talk about that in a moment. But what's happened is I've opened up a new tab, and I don't want that new tab. So I'm just going to close that out. So as you're naming layers, just be a little bit careful. If something weird happens, like a new tab opens, close it out. If you enter a weird mode, just kind of, back out. So naming the layers is pretty important. All right, as far as stacking this thing goes, I know that I want my clouds in the back. So the way that Photoshop works is whatever layer is on top. Let's see if I get 2 pieces of paper here. I think I did this little demo already, but let's say we got 2 layers here. We got a layer that's blue and a layer that's trolls. All right. If this is how the layers are, this is what you see. This is in front of this. So whatever's on the top of the layer stack is going to be in front. Well, I don't want the clouds in front. In fact, I want them all the way behind. So what I'm going to do is just click, hold, and drag and move those to the bottom. To be honest, I don't really need the background. The clouds are going to be the background. So this just kind of comes down to file management. If you had empty layers that there's nothing on, trash them. They're not doing any good. In fact, they're just adding extra file size for no good reason. So click on background and I'll trash it. And it says, do you want to delete the background? You bet I do. All right. Now, if your background is in there, if you've got that white layer in your file, you're not going to lose points, but try to get in good practices, good habits. Things that are unwanted, get rid of them. Okay, the clouds are in the background. Now, as far as what comes next, the hat or the apple, you could honestly do it either way. It doesn't really matter. I personally am going to put the apple on top. Maybe you should too, but it will work both ways. So I'm going to move the hat below the apple, and then I'm going to turn the hat off. Right now, I just really want to work with the clouds. So I'm going to turn the clouds on and make sure that I'm targeting the clouds. I'm going to literally click on the layer so I know that that's the layer that I'm going to affect. One other thing I'll say, and a student stuck around a little bit later on Tuesday, and they were running into a problem. This move tool, we will end up using it, not just yet, but if you click on the move tool, make sure that auto select is off. There it is on that little radio button. It's got a little check mark. That is problematic. In Photoshop, it will always cause more problems than it solves. In fact, if you can figure out a reason that this should be on, please let me know. I would love to. I was supposed to go to Adobe conference in October, but the district's not going to pay for it. That was going to be my first question. Like, hand up, why in God's name is that on by default? That's bananas. So turn that off. All right. Now we can work with the clouds layer. Clouds look good. However, if you deleted the background layer, or even if you didn't, it's kind of got these weird, almost like a letterbox, reverse letterbox look or something, where it's got these bands along the top and the bottom. When you see checkerboard, that is transparency, meaning that's see-through. I don't want that. So I need to make my clouds layer bigger. We know how to do this. It's a Control-T for transform. So with the clouds layer targeted, I'm going to hit Control-T, and I'm just going to scale it up. Looks good to me. I've gone end to end, right? I'll just hit Enter to apply it. I'm done with the clouds layer. I could lock it up at this point if I wanted to. I'm not too worried about it, but if you're a little bit like, oh, I might delete it or I might move it, with the layer selected, you can go ahead and hit the little lock icon. See it over here, boom, locked up. I can't do anything to it. I can't move it. I can't paint on it. Can't erase it. I can't do anything. So it's good to go. The next 2 layers are going to take a little bit more work. So let's start with, say, the hat layer. Turn the layer on, and I'm going to make sure that I'm targeting the hat. All right, so the hat looks good. However, I certainly don't want all this white around it. That doesn't look right. So I need to get rid of the white, which is going to require me to make a selection. Now, we've made selections before. You might have made lots of selections. Your first exercise had you make selections. Part of what makes a beginner Photoshop into an intermediate Photoshop user would be recognizing what selection tool is the best for what problem you have. The first 3 tools underneath your move tool are all selection tools. Here's your marquee tools. And if I click and hold, I've got a rectangular, elliptical, single row, and single column. Bonus points if anybody can figure out a use for single row and single column, because I've only found one. Underneath that, if I click and hold, I've got a lasso, polygon, magnetic. Okay. Underneath that, I've got a object, quick select, magic wand tool. Okay. So I've got a lot of tools in the proverbial tool belt, but which one's going to be right? You know, if I'm building a house and someone gives me a nail, I don't want to get a screwdriver or a wrench. I need a hammer. So what's the best hammer for this?
Would it be object select?
That's what I would use. That's one of the newer tools, and the AI capabilities with object select, I feel is really strong. However, if the image that you're working with does not have a keyed out background, remember we talked about keys last week, that would just be a flat background that does not blend in with whatever you're trying to select. So in this case, the hat's black, the background's white. That's about as keyed as you can possibly get. If you've got a keyed background, object select works great. If you don't, it might not be that great. So let's try the object select. If you don't see it, third one down. These 3 tools right here are all of your object or all your selection tools. They kind of group them together, which is nice. If you click and hold on the third one down, you should see these 3. Honestly, all 3 of them will probably do a pretty good job, but the object select, I think, is the best. So let's give it a shot. We're going to go to object select. Now, what you could do is you could just click once on it, or you could click, hold, and drag around it. You can see that as I hover it, it's already kind of like detecting what it sees. So that will work for me. This looks pretty good. So I'm just going to click once. Now this does take some time. So if you click and you're panicking like, oh God, it didn't work, give it some time. It needs to kind of generate. It's looking for edges. What it's looking for are differences in pixels, be it color or value. In this case, it's looking for dark pixels and it's looking for light pixels. It might end up grabbing a little bit of the shadow at the bottom. And if so, I'll have to clean it up later. But that looks like a pretty decent selection, in my opinion. Well, let's find out. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to drop a mask on it. So remember where the mask icon is? Towards the bottom here. White rectangle, little black hole in it. Click on it. There we go. All right. Not bad. You know, if we were doing this, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we'd still be hacking away at it. We'd be adding a little bit, taking a little bit away, adding a little bit, taking it away, or God, having to use paths or something. So this really saved a lot of time. It's got some problems, but for the demo, I think it'll be fine. What problems, you ask? It's got a halo around it. You can see that the hat, I don't want to use the object select anymore, so I'm just going to click the move tool. Now, you don't need to do this part. Just keep your eye on the screen. Anytime that I'm like, I mean, it looks pretty good, but how good is it really? I will create a background. I call them dummy layers. I'm going to make a dummy layer, and I'm just going to pick a color. In this case, it might be like a dark red. And I want to see if there's any stray pixels, because this can happen. It does happen a lot. I might have a bunch of jagged white pixels along the brim of the hat here, but I can't see those because they're blending in with the white of the clouds. So in between the hat and the clouds, I got the clouds targeted right now. I'm just going to make an adjustment layer. I'm going to choose solid color. And that bright red actually works pretty well. I'll make it a little bit darker. All right. I'm going to zoom in, take a look at my edges. Edges don't look terrible. I've seen worse. Little teeny bit of haloing there. Certainly around the top of the hat, but that could just be the light source. You know, maybe that's the way that it is. It looks weird because there is no real light source in this composition. So if I'm trying to make it look believable, that's something I'd want to address. But overall, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty decent. All right, we'll call the hat done for now. Turn the hat off, and I'm going to turn the apple on. Now, what tool would be good for this? Object select. go back to this. If it worked for one, I think this, then what's even better about this particular layer is it's got really sharp edges. That hat got a little bit smoky at the bottom. This one, I mean, I think what's happened is someone's made a selection and pasted this because that is an incredibly crisp edge right there. So I get a feeling that this is already a composite that I downloaded, but that's going to work just fine for us. So object select, boom, it sees everything. Click on it once, give it some time to think. And nothing happened. So it looked like it wanted to work, but it didn't. Can anybody tell me what I did wrong? Good. Well, that's good, Jacob. You did something different than I did. Take a look at my file and tell me, someone prognosticate what they think happened here.
Oh, were you in the wrong layer?
That's exactly right. So yes, object select saw this. Oh, actually it did. It did make a selection. Sorry. Problem is, if I put a mask on right now, I'm on the wrong layer. It will mask that adjustment layer. No big deal. Just make sure I'm on the right layer and not hit that mask. So guys, if that happens, or strike that, when that happens, because it will happen, you'll start to get more confident, you'll move faster, and you'll just kind of, then that something like that will happen. Control Z, back up, take a breath, look at your layers. Oh crud, I was on the wrong layer. No big deal. All right, we've got a hat, we've got an apple, looking pretty good. Now, there's a couple things that we need to do before we actually get to the compositing part. Does anybody remember, we briefly talked about it, and we will talk about it around, say, week 8, give or take, unless it comes up earlier. Anybody remember what this little icon in the lower right-hand corner of the layer is? Kind of looks like a piece of paper with a little square in front of it.
Yeah, it's a smart object.
It's exactly what it is. It's a smart object. The reason that all of these layers are smart objects is because here's how I created the file. I made a document, 9 by 9, 72. But instead of file open, click, hold, and drag, pull the file in, or duplicate layer, target this file, I did this. I went to File, Place, and it doesn't matter if it's linked or embedded. I'll choose embedded. Hey, look at these guys. Hit enter. When you place a document, it automatically comes in as a smart object. So know that. It's not, you didn't do anything wrong, but smart objects behave a bit differently, for better and worse, than traditional layers. So I'm going to trash this layer out. I don't need 2 apples. More often than not, that's why you'll see a smart object, because you placed it or somebody else placed it. However, you can make a layer into a smart object, and many times you will want to. And we'll talk about the benefits and the hindrances of that later on down the road. What you need to know right now is, being a smart object, the next couple steps that we're going to take is going to be kind of a hindrance. So we're going to do a couple things. We're going to, 1, apply the layer mask. 2, we're going to rasterize the smart object. So let's start with applying a layer mask. Applying a layer mask will take your mask and treat it as if you just erased it out. Your layer mask will be gone. So will the pixels that were being masked. To apply a layer mask is really simple. You just right click on the mask itself, and you can see that apply layer mask isn't even an option right now. It's ghosted out. And the reason for that is this is a smart object. So it won't let you apply it until you rasterize the smart object. Okay, well, let's rasterize a smart object. How do you do that? Pretty easy. You right click on the object, and apparently it doesn't like that. Sorry, I thought it was on the thumbnail. It's over to the side. Just click off to the side, anywhere in this like kind of waist area of the layer. Right click and choose rasterize layer. If you do it right, and it's not hard, but you should see that little smart object icon go away. Now that this is, I don't want to call it a dumb object. I feel like that's kind of a mean thing to say. It's just an object. It's no longer smart. Now that it's just a regular, yeah, now that it's just a regular layer, you can right click on the layer mask and choose apply layer mask. And there we go. So let's take a look. I'm just going to turn the clouds off for a second. I've got an apple on a transparent background, just as if I would have meticulously erased around it or used some type of selection tool and deleted everything else out. All right, so that looks good. We're going to do the exact same thing to our hat. First, we have to rasterize, then we have to apply this layer mask. So right click, rasterize. It's no longer a smart object. Right click on the layer mask, apply. Boom, boom, we're done. So there we go. I'll pause here. Anybody have any questions about any of that?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there another way to get to the apply layer mask? Because I'm not seeing it when I right click on the side.
You have to right click on the mask.
Yeah, right click on the mask.
Oh, okay, I see it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for chiming in there. Because you asked the question, Kelly, you said, how do I apply a layer mask? I heard, how do I rasterize a smart object? So I would have spent 2 or 3 minutes telling you something that is totally irrelevant. So thank you for chiming in. Okay, we're close. Now, in order to make a pretty seamless composite, I built this thing for you probably a little bit too well. I should have made the apple a bit smaller, because what I wanted you guys to do is transform the apple so it perfectly matches the edges of the bowler hat. I feel like the one that I made is almost there, but we're going to do it anyways just to get you in the habit of it. So we'll target the apple since it's on top, and I'm going to pull the opacity down to, I'm about 60%. I want to see the apple, but I want to see the hat underneath it as well. Now that I can kind of get an idea of the contours of both, we're going to go back to the move tool. Make sure that auto select is off. This is definitely going to throw you off if it's checked. Again, make sure that your layer apple is targeted, and I'm just going to click, hold, and drag. And it's actually okay. This is okay. It's a little bit bigger than it needs to be. Here, let's turn this layer on so we can see it a bit better. You can see that the edge of the apple over here, it's a little bit bigger than I want it to be. I want these edges to really kind of meld well. So pretty easy solution. We already know how to make things bigger and smaller. Control T. Again, I'm on the apple layer. And I'm just going to nudge this a little bit until those edges line up about as good as they possibly can. So you can see that right edge, right as the slope of the hat begins to, kind of round off, so does my apple. And on the other side, more of the same. If you're thinking, well, mine's not totally like his, who cares? If it's close, you get the idea. This is a masking exercise more than anything. But the better that those seams are, the more impressive I think your composite's going to look. All right, so this looks good, and I hit enter to apply it. On the apple, I'm going to bring that back up to 100%. So here we are. Why did we apply the layer mask? Because we're going to put another mask on the apple. If we painted on that original mask, you would start to, because we're going to paint out a little bit, we're going to paint in a little bit, out a little bit, in a little bit. And we're going to kind of just sweep through this thing at low opacity until we get a nice blend from green to black. If you were painting on that original layer mask, remember it had a white background? That's what you were masking out originally. And you start to paint things back in, that white's going to show back up. And it just really kind of deletes the purpose. So that's the reason I said deletes the purpose. I meant to say defeats the purpose, because that's the reason we deleted the white background. All right, so we got the apple still selected. Let's go ahead and apply a layer mask. You're almost there. You are in the home stretch. If you've made it this far and everything's making sense, or you're following along and everything's making sense, this next part, this is the fun part. This is where like the rubber hits the road. All right, turn my clouds back on. I'm going to get a brush. I would encourage you guys to just use the default brushes for the time being. I'm sure a lot of you have wacky brushes. Lord knows I do. But zip tone brushes and hair brushes and lava brushes, they're not going to help you much on this one. Just the default soft edge brush is what you're looking for. Where's that located? Click on a brush, and then you can go to Window, Brushes. So I'm under Legacy Brushes. I don't know if that will say that on your end. I had to load these again because I got rid of them. I don't use them very often. But for this, there's no other better brush. I've got a soft round. How do we check, brush parameters? Along with brushes is brush settings. So here's where you can set the hardness. So sometimes you want a really hard edge brush. Take the hardness and bring all the way up. Spacing, you can bring down so it's one consistent brush. Or if you wanted to do like a bunch of dots, a series of dots, you could increase the spacing. Your next project is a digital painting. I'm going to go through all the ins and outs of the brush engine. So if you're like, oh, I really like to learn a little bit more about that, hang tight. That's all coming. I'll show you how to load brushes, create brushes, save brushes, export brushes, tweak brushes, whatever you want. But for this, I'm going to decrease the spacing and decrease the hardness. Now, a few people are used to this up here, which is also your mini brush settings. These are great, especially for size and hardness, but it doesn't give you the full experience of brush settings the way that this would. You have a lot more options in here. But for what we need, if you want to just use this little widget up here, it's absolutely fine. All right, this is a 300 pixel brush. For what I'm doing, it's way too big. You could drop this down and bring the size down. Say, okay, well, that's a little bit too small. Let me make that a little bit bigger. It's a little bit too small still. Let me make it a little bigger. It's still a little bit. You can do that. You absolutely can do that, but you are wasting time. So when it comes to brushes, a hotkey that I find extremely useful is a real-time visual indicator, and that's your bracket keys. So left bracket, brush gets smaller. Right bracket, brush gets bigger. Left bracket, right bracket. Where are these brackets that I'm talking about? Look at your keyboard. I want you to ignore, if you've got a keyboard like mine, you've got a numeric pad on the right here. You've got your delete and your arrow keys right here. Right over here is backspace. Go caddy corner to that underneath your plus and minus icon. These are your bracket keys. You can go ahead and just click around. I don't think there's anything you can do on your keyboard that's going to mess up your brushes. But yeah, those are your bracket keys, and that's what you're going to want to do. Why do I like this? One, it's incredibly fast. It just boom, 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 boom. And two, let's be honest. You're in graphic design for a reason. Chances are you're something of a visual learner. What better way to say, all right, I need my brush this big. How big is that? How many pixels? I don't know. I don't care. It's just that's the size of the brush that I need. So yeah, using your bracket keys is really handy. Also, that same hotkey, those brackets, work for Illustrator's brushes too. I think it might actually work for After Effects' brushes as well. All right. Now, I'm on my mask, not my layer. If I paint right now, click, hold, and drag, paint, 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 nothing happens. Anybody know why that didn't delete anything? Why did, I'm going to paint again. I'm at 100% opacity. I've got a brush. Click, hold, and drag, and I'm not seeing anything turn invisible. Anybody got a guess as to what's going on there?
Don't you have to switch to black?
Yep. So I'm painting white on white. My window is clean. I'm seeing through my window. I'm just putting more Windex on the window right now. I'm just cleaning it off. That's all. So yeah, let's switch to black. Now if I click, hold, and drag, oh boy, there we go. Now, I see some students turn it in like this. They're like, I get it, I'm done. Cool. But if you want it to look really good and you want a really nice, believable composite, play around with your opacity. This is a really hard edge. Bring that opacity. When it comes to masking good composites, it's better to go kind of like slow and low, meaning several passes at a low opacity. I'm at 27% opacity, and I'm going to give it another click, hold, and drag. I might even bring my brush size down a little bit. Just by virtue of doing that, it's starting to look a little bit better. I might have gone too far with it. I might flip back to white. So you know what? I'll even go at a lower opacity. Go down to 16% opacity. Bring some of that back in. Here's the beauty of masking. If we did it, and I said this before, I'm going to keep saying it. I'm sorry. Thanks. If you do it with an eraser, there's no going back. You can't do this with an eraser. If you could, you would be a robot. You know, God bless you if you could do it. That's incredible, because I couldn't even begin to predict how much, you know, flow I would need with the eraser. So I like to say, all right, I'm going to bring a little bit back. I'm going to take a little bit away. I'm going to get those edges up a little bit. Maybe I went a little bit too far there, so I'll bring a little bit back and take a little bit away. Let's zoom out. If you ever want to go full screen with your composition, Control-0. We'll go full screen. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom. I think we're good. How do we feel about that? Do we have questions?
Do you think you can show the brush again, like how to make that transparent brush one more time?
Absolutely. Can you be just a tick more specific? Are we talking about the brush that I'm using to mask right here?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's another hotkey. Keep in mind, any palette that I'm on that you don't see, all of it's going to be under window. I don't have some weird mysterious interface that you don't have. Everything that I've got, you've got. And it's alphabetical. So just look for B for brush. What you won't have is rakes, zips, splatter, tiles, craft tones, stamp of death, dry brush, and rusty nib. Maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe you bought some of those, or maybe you found some of these, but you should have legacy brushes. It might not be called that, but it should be your default Photoshop brushes. If you don't see those, the little sandwich icon, the little 3 lines, if you drop that down, you should be able to choose legacy brushes, and that will bring up this folder. Twirl this down, and I just chose the soft round. You could choose the hard round and soften it, do the exact same thing. In fact, they're the exact same brush. One's soft and one's hard. That's all it is. So I chose the soft round. And from here, I chose brush presets, or I'm sorry, brush settings. I gotta be careful. Brush presets is something different. Brush settings. The hotkey that I was gonna let you know, because brushes come up a lot, keep in mind, your brushes are the same for paint brushes. They're the same for eraser brushes. They're the same for art history brushes, and they're smudge brushes. All of those are the same. So if you've got a soft round for a paintbrush, you got a soft round for an eraser. You got it for the smudge. You got it for this, that, and the other. Here under brush settings, this is where I set my hardness. So if your hardness is super hard and I paint, bring that up to 100%. Like, that doesn't look very good. That looks weird. You know, unless that's what you're going for, which I'm not. So I go back to my brush settings and say, okay, well, that didn't look right. So I'm going to bring the spacing down to nothing. That's what, if you notice, see that like kind of ripply part in the green? It's kind of almost looks like a awning or something. That's from the spacing. And by default, there's always like a 25% spacing. I don't really understand that either, but it's the way that it is. Go to your brush settings, and here's the hotkey F5. If you hit F5, boom, it just brings it right up. That way you don't necessarily have to even have it on your interface. If you just hit F5, Brush settings is docked right next to brush. You toggle between the two. Just kind of a fast way of getting to it. When you do your digital paintings, chances are you'll really want to commit to memory F5, left bracket, right bracket, and then B for brush. All right, so now that I got my brush, pull that spacing down to nothing, pull the hardness down to nothing, and I've got a nice big soft edge brush. Let me zoom out a bit. So I'm painting the image back in. Don't want that. I'm going to want to paint it out. So I'll flip to black. And I know I don't want it this much. So I'm at 100% opacity. I'll take one quick pass at 100 just to kind of speed things up a bit. Right about there. Again, that's 100% opacity. Now I'm going to dial that back down to, I think it was around 17%. You figure it out. Guys, this is like cooking. You know, if it asks for a tablespoon or teaspoon of salt and you're just like, nah, I'm just going to wing it, it's going to taste fine. It might taste better, really. So do not take any of these values as gospel. You figure out what looks good. All right, I'm at 17%. I'm going to flip back over to white, and I'm going to slowly just take a few passes here. Oh, I'm still at 100. Oh, I changed flow. Bring flow back up to 100, opacity down to 17. Now, I know that somebody's going to be like, well, what's the difference between flow and opacity? It's a good question, actually. I will show you when it comes to the painting demo, there is a difference. At first, it looks like they're the exact same. There is a difference. It's funny because I might have even been guilty of it. It's just been so long ago, I don't remember. But I'll see students that have a opacity of like 30% and a flow of 40%. And they're usually pretty funny. And I'll say like, well, why'd you do that? And if they're not trying to wind you up, they'll just immediately say, I don't know. It's just like, I accidentally did that. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about why that happened or what's going on there. And then when they're trying to lie and sound smarter than they are, they'll come up with a bunch of bull crap reasons why, well, I was there. And I was like, okay, let's stop. All right, so I'm just going to paint this stuff out. Keep going around it. I don't know who asked that question. Did that answer your question as far as the brushes go, whoever that was? Do you want to see that again? Didn't quite get that. That sounded a little weird. Do we want to see the brushes again, or are we good on that? I got kind of a weird little spot here. Try to fix that. These soft edge brushes will expand, so don't feel like the edge of the brush cursor, that's not as far as the soft edge reaches. It's like spray paint. That's your nozzle, but you know that spray paint has a dissipation. So instead of going right up to the edge here, I'll come kind of into the middle, click, hold, and drag, and you'll see that I'll get a little bit of fall off with a nice big soft edge brush. And that's starting to look pretty good.
Oh, did you hear something?
I hear an unmute, but it's kind of like a weird garbled. It sounds like a weird, like kind of like a soundtrack to a horror movie or something.
Oh,
It's okay. Go ahead and unmute. Was that you, Kano?
yeah, that was me. I am so sorry.
Oh no, come on, man. I like horror movies, so it's not gonna spook me out. I listen to Goblin all the time, so we're good. Did that answer your question though? That's the more important.
Yeah.
Okay, if you still got questions, let me know. But that's it, guys. Save this. You could save this as a JPEG if you wanted to, or a layered file. It doesn't really matter. I don't need to see your layers. If it looks like this, you're good. You could flatten it down if you wanted to. If you want to save the PSD, upload it to your Google Drive, call it exercise 2, submit that to Blackboard by next Tuesday. 10 out of 10, we're good to go. Anybody want me to run through that again, or we feel pretty confident with that? Keep in mind, this demo will be archived, and I've also got, let's see. Where is the channel? I wonder if I just go to YouTube. Give me 1 second. I want to try to find something. To show you, I'm not trying to make this stuff up. Okay. Somewhere buried in this mess, and I will share my screen with you. Somewhere in this mess is a demo. Where would it be? No. Ah, check it out.
This is a kickback to the surrealist artist Rene Magritte.
That's embarrassing. This thing was made 4 years ago, and I started the demo off literally with the exact same shtick that I did today. I got to come up with some new material, man. But here's the demo elsewhere, if anybody cares. Chat. So this had a lot of COD and Art Institute demos on there. Yeah, right. I don't know, Eddie, if that's a good thing or not, man. I guess you do something for so long, for so many years, that it just becomes like muscle memory. But you can follow along with this too. It's gonna different file, but same outcome. So that channel's out there. You feel free to look through any of my demos. There's nothing that's gonna get me fired on there. You can see how me and my family spent our COVID summer. It's kind of a kick. But yeah, that's out there too, folks. So should be plenty of resources to get you through whatever you need to get through.
I came in a little late, and maybe this will also be in the YouTube demo, but I got in right when you were talking about checking the page size. So I can just leave it at the 78.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
I don't have to edit anything.
Nope.
Okay, great.
I kept it small, so it would be a quick file transfer. It's not going to ever be printed, so why make it bigger than it needs to be? So yeah, don't change any of the file size.
Okay, thank you.
All right, folks, are we good on compositing and masking? I got a couple questions that I'd like to get to. I'll leave it recorded for this because I think that these are good questions and a lot of students could probably benefit from it. So if we're good, I'm going to close this thing out. I've got to finish this tonight. This is a logo for a CrossFit gym, and I'm going to be tooling around on this at some point, but we don't need to see that right now. New. Let's see if I can open something that's somewhat relevant to what we're doing. Two drawings. What do we got? Emojis, commission. Okay. So to Jacob's point, we're going to start with how do I apply an old texture, an old paper texture, and make something look old. Project 1 is an 11 by 17, 300 DPI. All right, so here we go. Let's see. So here's an example. I'll turn off the texture. You guys, yeah, should be seeing Photoshop. Let's see if I can find the texture. All And I'll turn on a background layer so we can really get the full effect of what's going on here. All right. Those cyan lines that you're seeing, those are guides. Feel free to use them. I'll show you how to use them, but I don't think it's important right now. But to hide them, if you ever see them, Control H to control hide. This is a series of posters I did for the Forest City Comic Convention, and they're made to look like old boxing posters from like the 10s, 20s, and 30s. So I did all the illustrations, laid out all the type, but it doesn't look quite old until you hit it with that vintage paper texture. So here's before, there's after. So just that one layer, man, makes it look old, what it is. So to Jacob's question, how do I do that? First, you got to find one. So if you're on Unsplash, download that paper texture. Once it's downloaded, you need to open it in Photoshop. So let's see if I can duplicate layer. I'll put it into a new document. You know what? Yeah, new document. All right, so there's my paper texture. I do think that textures.com is a great resource for these type of things, but also don't sleep on finding old newsprint. You know, of course, now that I'm looking for an old book, they're in the other room, but old books, the last page usually doesn't have any text on it. I'm talking old books, like old Bibles, old encyclopedias, old dictionaries, old stuff that's just yellow. Scan that stuff in, take pictures of it. Those are great textures. So here's a texture that I did not create, I found. And what you do is you would just open that texture, click, hold, and drag, move it into whatever document it is that you want to move it into. And it will come in like this. By default, it's going to, if it's on top anyways, and you will want it on top. There's no doubt about that. You will want your texture all the way on top. So let's put it right there. I'll turn off this hue saturation for a second. So here's my texture. Problem is it's not going completely end to end. There's a little area on the bottom here that's not quite right. So get my move tool and see. It's actually big enough. So if it's not, you'll Control T, make it a little bit bigger. Maybe I want that orange part along the top, so I'll just rotate it real quick. Enter to apply. And then Jacob, with the layer still selected, just change its blend mode. Usually, to make something look old like this, you want multiply. That's usually what it is. Now, I'm not saying that's all the time. You can cycle through. Let's see what color burn does. Yuck. Linear burn's not bad. The color's got a little bit too vibrant. You know, when I think of old things, they don't have a lot of chromatic color. Like that vibrance has been sapped out from the sun. So I don't like that. The darken colors look weird. So darken also messes up my color. So I'm going to stay with multiply. And then I might turn on a hue saturation adjustment. And all this is doing is pulling some of the saturation out. So here's that 0. It looks good. It's okay. You know, but red's too red. I know, man, I've worked in enough video stores to know that if a poster sits out in a window long enough, after a summer, I peel that poster down. It's like, whoa, my God, I think it's been bleached out. So I just take the saturation and pull it down. So there's like some color, but it's not, you know, fire engine red anymore. It's just like, it's really subdued. So that's how I do it. Does that make sense, Jacob?
Yep, that makes sense.
Cool. Well, you try it and let me know if it doesn't work, and then we'll work on it together.
I've already tried it and it looks very well.
All right, man. Now we're talking. All right. Problem 1 solved. Next problem. I think it was Joe. You've got a composition that's a little bit too big, right? He might have stepped away for a second, so it's not a big deal. Let's do it on this comp. I'm going to flatten this thing down just because I don't need all the layers right now. Or let's see if I got something else. Yeah, I'll do it on this one. All right. So you won't want to do this but I am just to make it go faster. All right, let's see how big this thing is. Image size. 12 by 18. It's a poster size, but it's kind of an oddball poster size. If I was trying to make this as cheap on the client as possible, and they said, I want a series of posters, which they did. I think they actually wanted 11 by 17, so this might actually work pretty well for this demo. I'm at 12 by 18. It's a bit too big. So here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to go to image size and plug in a width of 11 and a height of 17. Now, in this case, I don't think a whole lot is going to happen. I think it might look okay. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't get a whole lot of weird aspect ratio bending. I got lucky, but it's not good. So let me Control Z that. Let's go to image size again. This time I'm going to turn on the lock icon, and let's turn the width to 11. So if it wants to be perfectly constrained, the artwork doesn't squash and stretch or turn funhousey. When I turn the short end down to 11, the tall end now is 16.5. That is a perfect aspect ratio. Problem is, it's not 11 by 17. You try to put this in 11 by 17, you're going to have a 1/4 inch gap at the top and a 1/4 inch gap at the bottom, or a 0.5 inch gap at the top or the bottom. That's not what you want. Either way you slice that, that's not what you want. So how do we do this? Cancel. If you need to make something smaller and you can't sacrifice the aspect ratio, which you probably shouldn't, you need to choose the next one down, which is canvas size. Canvas size is going to retain the integrity of the artwork. It's just going to make the bounding box a different size. So now I can say, all right, my canvas needs to be 11 inches wide, 17 inches tall, and choose OK. It's going to give me a prompt. It's going to say, OK, hey, just so you know, you're going to lose some stuff. That's fine. We'll go ahead and proceed. So I did lose some stuff. Well, now what I can say is, all right, well, I chopped some stuff off. How much stuff do I still have? Have your layer selected, Control T, and now I can just kind of scooch it down until I'm happy with, what it looks like. That's about as good as I can get it. This is also the reason that you really want to get the dimensions right the first time. Otherwise, you might have to end up redoing some stuff. So try to get it right the first time. It doesn't always happen. Either you made a mistake or the client made a mistake or a combination thereof. But if you need to shrink something down, canvas size, not image size, okay? What canvas size will not affect is the resolution. If you need to, maybe I want to make this into like an Instagram post. If that's the case, image size, well, it doesn't need to be printed, so I'll change 300 to 72. I'll change inches to pixels, and a height of 1190, that's a bit much. I'll take the height, and again, make sure that these are locked up. I'll take the 72. Height, I'm guessing, I don't know, 1,000? Okay. And this thing was 42 megabytes. It's not giant, but for online, that's way too big. After I make this operation, it's going to go down to 1 megabyte. So I chucked out a lot of information. Still going to look good online. I won't be able to print it, but man, is it going to upload so much faster. So if this was online, this is what it looks like at 100%. So that's how you would want to alter a canvas size versus an image size. They're both good. It's just you need to know when to choose what. That's it. All right, close this thing out. I don't know. Joe, are you with us? Did that make sense when it comes to like shading?
Yeah. Yep.
If you're worried about it, man, save, take your composition, save version 2, and then try it. That way you still got an archived copy. Because maybe you want a 16 by 20. Maybe you want to print it yourself and you like a 16 by 20. That's cool. Save that one and call it 16_20 20, and then save it again, call that one 11_17. Then do your canvas size to it. It's never a bad thing to have multiple iterations of it. Because once you do some of this stuff and you save it, that's that. I've done a few things, where I've been moving too fast, it's been too late at night, maybe I had too many cocktails or something, and I do a image size operation, I save it, close it out, come back the next day, and I'm like, oh crap, well, oh crap. And then I gotta redo it. So don't do that. Alrighty. All right, so I think that answers all the questions. I'm gonna just open up something new. I don't want to look at this rat right now. All right, everybody. We're about an hour in. Let's do this. I'm going to stop recording. Let's take a 5-minute break. I gotta get up, use the restroom. I'll come back. I'm just gonna mute my mic and mute my shine my camera. You know what I'm trying to say. But I will stop recording right now, as a matter of fact.